Welcome to Reddit Recap. Don't forget to subscribe. Reddit asks, what did you learn embarrassingly late? When I was 20, I was presented with a really wonderful promotion. It required me to fly to a nearby state for a week of training. I was super ecstatic about the whole thing. Until I remembered a friend of mine complaining about her struggles with getting a passport. So, I promptly declined the promotion. My superiors were really stumped as to why I turned down the promotion. Me. Unfortunately, I don't have a passport. Manager. Boring berry. You've never flown before. Have you? Me. No. I have not. Manager. You don't need a passport to fly within the country. And then it hit me, my friend was going to Mexico. I was just going to a neighboring state. Once the realization hit, my superiors all erupted in laughter. The story itself followed me when I went to training. My trainer personally greeted me and asked me if I had any difficulties getting a passport before laughing. I was circumcised. I never knew I was circumcised until I went to the pediatrician and my mom told the pediatrician that I was circumcised. Glass objects should not be put on the stove. Guess how I learned that? Edit. Not to be stereotypical or anything, but the gold is super appreciated. Pickles are pickled cucumbers. Look me over 30 years to figure that one out. I thought buffaloes were birds, and buffalo wings were from said birds. That guys didn't have to squeeze their dicks to get their pee out. The proper way to say mythology. It was my favorite subject and I talked about it all the time and not one person told me it wasn't a mythology. Found out when my teacher corrected something I read out loud in English class as a senior in HS. I still cringe. Vagina and pee hole are separated. That my cat didn't go back to the pet store when it was sick. I had even heard all the jokes about pets going to the farm. Still didn't strike me till way too late. That IHOP is the International House of Pancakes. I never made the connection that they were the same thing. So until recently I thought the International House of Pancakes was like a Hall of Fame type museum restaurant for pancakes. That it's pay-per-view, not pay-per-view. You know when the doctor hits your knee to check your reflexes? I honestly thought you were supposed to kick your leg up high. Like you felt it and you kick. It wasn't until I was 23 and moved to another country and had to do a physical that the doctor was like, what are you doing? I thought Gwen Stefani's name was Gwen Stefani until I was like 20 lol. When I was little my dad told me the big cooling towers that are often found beside electricity generating plants were in fact cloud machines and the prime minister of the day had a switch on his desk to turn the big machine on when it got too hot. This made complete sense to me as they did produce big clouds of white cumulus-like exhaust when operating. Fast forward to when I was around 11 years ago and the teacher asks if anyone knows why some days are dry and some days it rains. Some days have blue sky and some days have clouds. Of course at the mention of clouds I knew immediately where clouds come from and stuck my hand up to tell everyone about the Prime Minister and the cloud machines. Luckily the teacher picked someone else for the answer and I was most confused to hear someone go on about evaporation and rainfall and so on. Ellen DeGeneres. That several does not in fact mean 7. When Tails was introduced in Sonic 2, I thought it was cute that his real name was Miles per Hour and his nickname was Tails. 25 years later, I was thinking about it and said to myself, Miles per Hour. Miles per hour. Oh my god. I just never connected the dots before. That Washington DC wasn't in the state of Washington. That I was in fact not missing a testicle. Thought there was supposed to be 3 until I was like 14 years old. It's hard to explain this one and I can't Google it to find pictures. Everyone has bought a tube of cream at some point, antiseptic steroid eczema, for example. On some of these creams. Have you noticed that the lid is circular but in the center of the lid it has a sharp pointy end? Typically, these tubes of cream have a seal and I used to remove the lid and break the seal by finding anything sharp and pointy nearby, pen maybe. It took my 23 years to realize that the pointy end in the center of the lid has a purpose. I learned how to swallow pills at 26. Always had a problem trying to gulp them down and they just kept swimming around in my mouth. Up until then I always had to mush them up and just bear with the bitterness whenever I was sick. That the ribs my siblings and I ate as kids were not from velociraptors. My dad and mom had always called them velociraptor ribs for some reason, and I guess we just figured our dad was so big and awesome that it made sense that he would often go out and kill dinosaurs for us to eat. I don't think I found out until I was in junior high that they were just regular ribs. Thought an orgasm and an organism were the same thing. Gave an entire speech to my class at 13 years old. First month at a new school. About how I wanted to be a marine biologist and work with marine organisms. Everyone was laughing and I didn't know why. The teacher didn't say anything, just laughed along as well. A girl I'd just made friends with had to fill me in after class. Turns out, they are definitely not the same thing. That limes weren't unripe lemons. Now I'm someone who's very uptight about sex nudity around my parents. Imagine Hank Hill hearing his mom talk about sex. He'd say "Wah." It was the late 90s. I was 15. Limp Bizkit was all the rage. To my knowledge my mom had never heard Limp Bizkit. I didn't understand what the song was about. I wasn't prepared for what followed. I asked, "Hey mom." "Yes? What does the word nookie mean?" "It means an abundance of mindless repetitive sex." "Oh." And I've never felt more cringe than in that moment. That was the day I learned to always use a dictionary first. Rottweilers are not just fat Dobermans. That you're supposed to get anesthesia when you get your split chin stitched. When I was in grade school, 4th grade, 8 years old, I propped myself up between 2 tables and swung my legs back and forth. No idea how it happened, but I ended up falling and splitting my chin open. Apparently school couldn't reach my mom and called my dad. Parents were divorced. Dad was an OB-GYN. He took me to the hospital and put stitches in my chin without giving me anything for the pain. I remember crying and screaming the whole time. He said shit like, "Should I put another stitch here?" And needless to say, I sobbed no. He put it. Of course. Afterwards, the nurse gave me 3 lollipops because I was a good girl. I knew I wasn't a good girl because I bawled so much. Somehow I rationalized that dear old dad didn't give me anesthesia because you're not supposed to when it's an injury on the chin. It wasn't until college, when someone talked about his experience with getting his chin stitched, that I realized that my dad was a fucking asshole. That Bill Nye and Bill Nye are separate people. Junior year of college. Orgasms exist. There are races of Mennonites and Amish people other than white. I grew up in a small city and was pretty sheltered. That you don't pronounce the A in Coco. I didn't know that women could get pregnant without experiencing an orgasm. I learned that this year. At age 26. I'm gay and never really considered it. So dumb. How to figure out my age. Before I was trying to remember all my birthdays until I was told I could just do the math. Edit. I got onto Reddit to see my karma jump from 2 digits to 4. Didn't learn until I was 20. White meat and dark meat come from the same chicken. When I was in 4th grade I was in love with Chris Brown. He was 16. I told my mom when I was 16 we would start dating. She proceeded to inform me that when I was 16 he would no longer be 16. That's when I realized everyone was also getting older. Not just me lol. That my mom pronounces bagels as beagles on purpose to mess with me. English is her second language. So I just always assumed that she didn't know the right pronunciation. I was in my late 20s before I realized it. I should have known. It's definitely something she would do. Brown noses are brown from kissing people's butts. Yeah no. Like they're covered in shit. I was in my late 20s when I put that one together. That you can actually perform maintenance on a lawnmower, that is, oil changes, and not just put a new one every few years. I moved a lot growing up and as a result we didn't always hang on to larger appliances, so I was like 21 before I learned lawnmowers aren't basically disposable. Martha's Vineyard isn't just some land that rich people went to that was owned by Martha Stewart. Ambulances don't patrol around like police cars. That's all for this video. You made it to the end. If you enjoyed the video, please consider subscribing so you know when the next videos are released. Thanks for watching. Have a good one.